Thank you very much for the warm welcome. By that I'm perfect, we have the presentation set up. We will be speaking today at the extremely well-packed panel about the esports, and I would probably would love to start with definition of esports. Esports is a competitive gaming, which means that people are not playing with the physical bodies, but they are playing at the computers. At the same time, second thing to probably discuss is this is played by the gamers. And of course, gamer, usually we think about a person that lives with his mom in the basement, eating all the fast food and energy drinks. He doesn't go social, he doesn't have disposable income, so why should we actually care about him, right? So, let's see.
46,000.
What you've seen was the major in Counter-Strike. These were all the guys, they were sitting in the basement, they have no disposable income and they don't want to socialize. So this is actually esports. Many of the competitions that we will be speaking about are comparable to the traditional sports. We have more than 20,000 of attendees in the venues that are hosting the majors, either in Dota 2, Counter-Strike and other events. The prize pool is many times higher than $1 million, and many times we are speaking about the viewerships of tens of millions of people that are watching from their home online globally. With this being said, the relationship to the betting industry is that whenever there are eyeballs, there is usually also the intention to bet, to put the money where your mouth is. And this industry is growing rapidly. We are looking at more than 20 billion of handle by 2028 with increasing growth rate. And what we are seeing in our portfolio of the clients, many of them, esports betting is already 5 to 10% of their betting volume. And this has the potential to increase to 10 to 15% by the end of 2030. What is also important to say is that we are not speaking about the people that are underage. Many of them, more than 70%, are already in their productive age, so they have a much higher than average disposable income. As I mentioned already, we are speaking about esports in the comparison to traditional sports, where when it comes to viewership, when it comes to player base, when it comes to prize pool, many times esports is already matching, if not overwhelming, the traditional sports. Adam, the ex-director of Betway, already said a couple of years ago, when it comes to Betway, it is not about actually trying to find a market. The market is already there. This is about addressing them. If we can think about Counter-Strike, Dota 2, or League of Legends, these titles are around for more than 10 years. So whoever played those games in their 20s, they are already in their 30s or 40s. They have the families, they have the income. Because of their computer literacy, they are much better suited when it comes to the disposable income, so they are actually there to bet. Some of the quick statistics, we are speaking already about 500 million of fans. More than 68 of them are under the age of 35. Usually we are speaking about the range of starting with the 20s. And also, if you look at any other sports, esports is much younger, which means that the lifetime value of any of these bettors is significantly higher than if you compare them to traditional sports, something like horse racing or something like that, where even if you look at MLB in the US, the average age of bettor is 55. So you can imagine the difference in the lifetime value of the bettor. So this was presented by my marketing department, so I do not necessarily need to quote myself. But as stated already, there is a huge misconception of esports that we are speaking about the gamers that are nowhere close to being adults with disposable income. It is the quite opposite. What are the key titles in esports? It is Counter-Strike, League of Legends and Dota. It is different depending on the region. When it comes to Asia, we will be mostly looking at League of Legends for China and similar territories. We will be looking at Dota when it comes to Southeast Asia.
You know, you want to see? See, I like to show you. Do you guys want to show me? Okay. Let's go. Touch me. Okay. It's slow. Mãos, os ombros. It's going well. Okay. Lino. Aos 3. Saltamos e rebentamos com isto. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Mais uma. 1, 2, 3. Vamos à frente. Bora lá. Vamos bater no ar. Já aquecemos os pés. Estás pronto? Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready for this, man. Let's do it. You gotta clap for me. Okay. And when we do it, okay, we gotta scream. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
This gives me good goosebumps all the time when I'm saying it. This is what esports is about. It's about passion, it's about players. If you think about traditional sports, not many of us are probably able to play soccer on a regular basis, to play basketball, baseball on a regular basis. With esports, you just sit to your computer and you can play the similar game as the pros are playing. You can watch them play, so you can actually improve your skills. So there are a lot of things where esports is actually much more engaging than traditional sports. With that being said, and coming back to the topic of betting, when it comes to average size of esports, it's significantly higher than any other sports, at least based on the portfolio that we work with. And also, much more action happens in live, because that's where the action happens, that's where bettors want to bet. One additional thing I would like to point out, and this is strictly related to betting, when COVID came, many of the content was gone. Nothing was being played. So what came out of COVID was that there are eSims, e-simulators as we call them, like FIFA and NBA 2K, where the traditional people or traditional bettors that never actually bet on any of these sports because they do not play it, but they still do understand soccer and NBA, and basketball. So what they started to bet on, when there was no action, on actually players playing against each other. And this is the trend that we are seeing continuing also after COVID. This is what FIFA and or e-soccer and e-basketball is about. With that being said, just a short summary and we will continue with the panel. When it comes to esports, we are speaking about much younger audience, where lifetime value will be significantly higher than in traditional sports. They are digitally savvy because they grew up with the computers, with mobiles in their hands, and this positions them better when it comes to their disposable income. The industry is constantly growing. When it comes to Asia, esports is many times in many countries already the mainstream, so you don't need to actually argue what esports is and what it's about. Many of the bookmakers that understood the potential are actually already significantly increasing their volume, and they are profiting from this trajectory, while the others are just staying behind and they do not understand, and there's a misconception around esports. And there is that moment of diversification of your portfolio in the COVID times where the content was still up. So that's pretty much it. Outside of one of the invitations, there will be a Belly Major in Dota 2 at the end of June and beginning of July. So if anybody is interested to learn more about esports, I would definitely welcome you to stop by, and you will see the similar passion as you've seen on those videos.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that really perfect introduction, Marek, to a topic that is often at the center of a lot of attention. whether good or bad or otherwise. And we have some really interesting people up here on stage, a lot of expertise on the stage today for esports, for those of you that are interested. And if you're not interested, I think probably after Marek's presentation, you should be. And so maybe perhaps as a start, a brief one-sentence introduction, if you don't mind, and we can kick off. Maybe we'll start with you, Benedict, and we work down.
Hello everyone, my name is Benedict and I work for Shikenso. Shikenso, we are on a mission to make sponsorship transparent in esports. That means we measure brand exposure through AI and make the data available for sponsors and also other stakeholders in esports.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane Guan, Chief Commercial Officer at Pinnacle. We are known as a B2C brand in the betting space, but also started our B2B solution. We have been investing in esports for over a decade, and we are quite excited to also announce we are starting off our new Pinnacle Cup esports event as of end of this month.
It's awesome, and everyone already knows Marek, so we don't need to talk about Marek anymore. But I really feel like I am a bit of a talk show host today. I feel like this is the late night show, ASEAN edition. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm just kidding. Stephen Hanna is my name. I'm the Director of Global Strategy for the Esports Integrity Commission. We do a lot of work internationally on regulating esports from an integrity angle, which has a lot of dealing with, of course, betting fraud, and such. And hopefully with our collective expertise on the stage, we can offer you some insightful conversation and some great takeaway that you can apply in your respective operations. And maybe as a starting point, let's talk about what Marek left off with, understanding esports, right? So you gave us a really good background, Marek, on the general concept of esports and what it is. Maybe just from each of you, just one point of what you think the most common misconception that you've seen in the gambling industry about esports being, and I think, Marek, you touched on a few. So let's stay away from the adults, the kids in the basement sort of thing. From a gambling operation perspective, what do you think are the most common misconceptions that people have about esports? Maybe, Marek, if you want to kick off.
Very right question, a very good one. Outside of the one that I already mentioned and Steven touched as well, it would be the chicken egg problem that we are seeing with many of the operators that we do not work yet with. They are thinking about the esports in a way that it's small, it's not growing, I'm not interested. But this is usually the chicken egg problem from two perspectives. If you have a crappy product or no product at all, and if you do not speak to that audience in the language that they are used to, then nobody would come in your way. So, and that means that you are not investing in the product, you are not investing in the communication/marketing. So of course nobody comes, and you are in a vicious cycle that unless you actually break it and get a decent product or the best product on the market, and start communicating to the audience, they will start coming and you will see the growth. But unless you break that, you are not going to see the potential of esports at all.
That's great.
Yeah, I second that from talking to a lot of our B2B potentials, a lot of times you can't get people try to invest into esports, they are not seeing the results. Definitely, I think one of the factors comes from the products, but also can be a misconception where, people put a brand in front of the esports audience and think that's going to automatically drive revenue. It doesn't work like that. The esports audience is all about authenticity. You need to build that brand awareness and make them feel that you are genuinely investing into that esports scene.
That's great, and maybe, Benedict, you can help me with this a little bit. So on that point, Jane, something very commonly said, and I think if you've been to an ASEAN Gaming Summit before and you've seen my head on the stage, I've said that to you all. But I guess taking on that point, there's an idea that sometimes, we don't understand the esports persona as an individual and unique identity, right? We generally, a lot of operations, when they look at esports, it's like, hey, this is another vertical. We can apply the same strategy, same execution here, and hopefully it'll all work, which is what you were just sort of alluding to, right? And so, Benedict, maybe you can shed some light on what you feel is sort of the key points of, or a key point of difference in the esports participants' persona. What's different about them?
All right, so what I've observed over the past years, unfortunately, was that sponsors enter the market, the esports industry, and they basically structure their marketing campaigns around the product, whereas they don't focus or don't understand basically the consumer or the gamer out there. So it's important to tackle this from a user-centered approach, that you truly produce or create these marketing campaigns around them. And once you do that, so let's say you step into esports, it's also extremely important to have some data at hand, because we want to make data-backed decisions moving forward. Yeah, so when I'm talking about data, Marek has shown these slides where we see these millions of viewers, like these spectators joining in these events, but you truly want to understand, okay, where do they come from, what's their age, and what are they interested in? Yeah, so that would be the audience analysis of things. But then also, given my marketing agency background, like you want to make decisions or justify your sponsorship investments. And then usually we would look at KPIs such as like brand exposure, like how many seconds was actually my logo visible in the stream, but also what kind of media value did this create? Yeah, so we, for this, like to measure this, we have like a AI-powered solution where we track every brand exposure in the stream, and then we would check, okay, how many people are watching in this frame or in this second, and then we would check, okay, where do they come from? This gives us a media value, and then you can justify your spend, but also optimize the campaigns moving forward.
So a lot of information there about data and sponsorship. And I think, Jane, you'd be familiar with the fact that, of course, and we'd all be familiar with the fact that esports is an umbrella term, many different titles. Marek, you alluded to that. You gave us 3 of the top titles in your presentation. How different is the approach for each title on a operator level?
I think it's vastly different. I think it's very important for whoever's investing into the esports. First of all, the dynamic between different regions can vary a lot. For example, if you're investing to Southeast Asia, it's more about the mobile games. If you're investing to LATAM, it's a different scene. If it's Canada, so understanding your region and what the players are following there is important. And I think another element that is a bit unique, or maybe not so unique, I mean, on the traditional sports scene, years ago, there's been a lot more integrity issues, whereas on esports side, it's improving, but in a way, it's still kind of shaping the form. So we do have challenges. I think that's one area maybe people are not quite aware, that you could be investing your marketing dollars into sponsoring a team, for example. However, if you didn't make the right choice, it can come back and put a reverse impact.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. So obviously from an Integrity Commission perspective, we've had situations where we've seen really well-established sports books put sponsorship behind teams that are essentially fake. They don't really exist. And so the teams will then sort of take that sponsorship to a tournament operator who is owned by the team, and they will create this massive farce and produce all of these statistics and ROI output and pass it back to the sponsor as a justification, or to the sportsbook as a justification for what they've done with the spend. And that's actually a really common thing, particularly in the Asian region, that we've been observing for some time now and working with law enforcement on. And so I guess having said that, as a sportsbook, how do, or as a group of people in the gaming industry, how do we get educated on what to engage with and what not to engage with? How does that mystery become solved? Marek, maybe you can speak to that. Maybe we can start with the odds provision side.
Absolutely. One just quick side note. What is probably important to mention is that specifically with this audience, esports players, not professional players, but esports players, they tend to be more inclined to gambling and betting. And the reason for that is that historically there was a skin betting scheme where they were able to bet with skins that are sort of in-game items that has a value, even though slightly virtual, slightly real. And the other things are loot boxes. People in many games, Brawl Stars, you can name it, FIFA, they are inclined and well known to loot boxes, so the thrill of the game is something that they already experienced, so they are much more inclined to actually bet in the future. And this is what is many times underlined with a lot of data as well. Coming back to Steven's question, it depends, and what we are seeing also, exactly what Jane mentioned, across our clients when it comes to either YOLO, Betway, and other partners that we work with. It depends on the region because esports is multiple sports. So similarly, as we are not speaking about soccer, tennis, and basketball in one category as a ball sports, but in each and individual one, esports future is also that we will stop speaking about esports as such. We will start speaking about Counter-Strike, Dota 2, League of Legends separately. Because if you go to Scandinavia, it will be about Counter-Strike. But if you go to Philippines, it will be all about Dota 2. If you go to Brazil, it will be about combination of Counter-Strike, Free Fire, and League of Legends. So it heavily depends on which region you are targeting, because also then the teams that you want to sponsor, the tournaments that you want to sponsor, the influencers that you want to work with are different, because it will be just throwing money away if you go to Philippines and if you start promoting League of Legends. It's similar as if you start promoting ice hockey. Most probably there will be no eyeballs, there will be no visibility, you will just lose money there.
And so what we see really is failure in execution and largely hinges on an uninformed persona that we're targeting, right? And so we've discussed that, from a sponsorship level, Benedict was saying there's a lot of data there that we need to measure to be able to report back to sponsors that are helping us venture into these regions. From a title level, every region is different in terms of their interest, what they want to participate in, what they don't want to participate in. And then, of course, from a legitimacy perspective or an integrity perspective, there are some bad actors out there that we need to be also aware of as well. Now, when it comes to esports odds, or providing odds on esports, I guess for me, there are some really stark differences between traditional sports odd creation and also esports odd creation. Perhaps either Jane or Marek, you could shed some light on some of the key differences and why there is a bit more complexity in the esports odds creation process, and perhaps more room for integrity issues.
Sure. I think, Marek, you kind of touched on that. So whilst looking at the marketing side, each esports title is vastly different. The same applies when it comes to odds compilation. If you look at CSGO or League of Legends, one is a shooting game and the other is more about the strategy. So the way that you go about and build your trading algorithms and understanding each element, how that should shift your odds is completely different. So so first of all, from the modeling side, you need to build something that's unique across different esports titles. And in terms of also hiring for the talents who understand how to trade those events, you also need to have the right people who are following each of the esports title.
I'll just give the example. If you think about soccer, you have 22 players on the field, 2 nets, and 1 ball, right? If you think about Dota 2, you have still just 10 players, but they can select out of 100 plus heroes. They can actually scale differently. That can buy 100 plus items that do different things. So essentially, you have a huge complexity in the game where the game is heading in live. And as I pointed out, more than 80% of the volume happens in live while the game is being played. So you need to adjust the lines properly depending on what is happening in the game. So the complexity is completely different. And at the same time, if you think about probably almost any sport, usually, again, the example of soccer, if you are winning 3-0, then for you to lose, you need to start winning only 3-1, 3-2, there is a draw 3-3, and then you are losing 3-4. In Dota 2, you are constantly winning, you have a huge advantage, both us and Pinnacle will probably quote the odds on that team 101, and suddenly there's a huge team fight, and it can completely reverse the position of the game, where suddenly the other team is winning. So within 10-second team fight, you can suddenly have the odds going from 1.1 to 18, because the team is suddenly losing. Everybody is skilled, they are pushing the base. So this is the complexity that you are not seeing in traditional sports, but you can see in esports.
And that's a great cap off. And also sponsorship works a lot differently too. And so there is obviously inward and outward sponsorship here. So for example, we've had situations where we've had betting companies or gaming companies come to us and say, we'd like to sponsor the CSGO major. And we have a thing with Valve where we actually will vet that company for Valve, and we'll say to them, yes, you know what, this company's good enough, they can sponsor the major, or not, right? And so before people go throwing money into esports sponsorship-wise, or accepting sponsorship as a catalyst or a tool to accelerate deployment into esports, what are some key metrics that you think, Benedict, that are relevant to keep an eye on in that context?
So when we talk to companies and esports organizations out there, so I would categorize them into like tournament organizers, teams, and then you have agencies and sponsors. And what we notice, so when we talk to teams, is that probably like around 70% actually overvalue their sponsorship packages. Yeah, so when we apply our AI and measure actually the value that they create, most of them, like 70%, overvalue their sponsorship package. And this would then result sometimes in like sponsors that are disappointed with the outcome. So what you have to do is like a proper due diligence before you tap into esports. There is some reports in the market already that you can basically buy off the shelf, or once you tap in, you have to make sure that you have a proper tracking available. And talking about KPIs, I would, I think, divide it into two categories. Number one is audience analysis, because you have to make sure that you reach the right audience, yeah, let's say country, age, sex, like the demographics. And then the other thing that you have to look at is basically the brand exposure. Yeah, for the money that we invest, what is like the airtime of the brand? You can also ask questions about like, is someone mentioning our brand in the live chat? Like there's tools as well that you can capture that. Or even like voice analysis, if someone is talking about your brand live. Yeah, so you can track all this. So this is the other side, the brand exposure. I would say the golden KPI I would ask for is basically the media value that was generated during an event. Yeah, because the media value allows you to calculate your return of sponsorship investment. So you can say then, okay, we invested 100,000, we generated 400,000, so that would be like an ROI of 4. And yeah, and this allows you to then truly like justify the spend, but also you can compare it to your other investments. Yes.
Perhaps I can just chip in on that, because Pinnacle has been doing some esports sponsorship over the last few years, and we had a few hard lessons that we learned through the process. So when it comes to the sponsorship, like you touched on, there are various different options. You could be, sponsoring a tournament. You could be sponsoring an influencer, or it could be sponsoring a team, or some people, they went directly to work directly with organizers such as the ESL. So I think it's quite important for an organization to understand what your key target is, because for each different options, if, for example, the conversion is more on, if the target is more on a conversion into the betting volume, then you might make a very different decision, because there are certain, for example, when it comes to team sponsorship, it's a little bit harder to track the direct conversion from the activities you are doing to the players or the direct customers than comes to your product.
That's really good. That's really good. Do you have anything to add? All good?
All good.
Well, that's really good because it leads us well into the next observation that I wanted to kind of help us to form. And so talked about so far is common misconceptions. We've talked about complexities of esports as a unique phenomena, comprising of many sub-phenomena that need to be well understood, well categorized before you enter into the market. The idea that there's a persona, an esports person persona that is different and unique in every region, in every title. And so there is, and from an odds perspective, there's a lot more complexity, sort of almost a permutation of different odd variables that come into calculation, into consideration for calculation. And now we've talked about sponsorship and the need to understand essentially what your target is. A bit of a common theme coming here. You need to basically, and I think you would all agree, understand your position as it relates to esports as a science. Right, not just this is a nice thing, it's another revenue base, we need to throw money at it and see what happens, because there's so many ways to spend the money in esports incorrectly and just end up falling sort of flat on the face from a strategic perspective, and get a bit of sort of internal organizational discouragement that is perhaps misplaced because it lacked in execution and lacked in knowledge. Now, what I wanted to kind of finish off on, and kind of, I feel like this is a little bit, I feel like this would be a good first step for everybody in the room if you're considering esports. Understanding this next issue that we're going to discuss will give you a good first step to starting that discovery journey into studying esports as a science for your operation. And that discussion point is the distrust that esports industry has for betting generally. I think it's not a uncommon thing. Everybody knows that publishers and some organizations in esports, these endemic organizations in esports, they don't necessarily have the best understanding of and relationship with betting as an industry. And so how do you feel that gaming operators, whatever it may be, betting books, sports books online, how do these companies in the gaming industry bridge that gap of distrust? And what do you think, in the past has caused that distrust in the gaming sort of industry and that lack of engagement?
I feel like integrity is one of the factors that definitely, goes into the play. It's very easy for someone to associate an integrity issue with, if a betting operator is involved. It might be completely, they are not aware of the underlying issues, but that's the perception that can be caused to the wider audience in an esports scene. And the other thing I think, and this probably doesn't just apply to betting, but also crypto. They had a lot of involvement in the esports scene. But going back to the esports audience, they would love to see brands being there consistently, supporting and giving back to the esports community. So I feel like, having that consistency and give time, invest in that audience, so they will see the effort you are building into that audience.
Yeah, so not just like a one-off, throw some money at this thing and hope it works, but actually take some real estate in the industry and stay there and build and grow alongside the industry. Yeah, I think that's a really good observation.
Yeah, in that sense, also whether somebody likes it or not, if we look at esports, pretty much one of the top 3 sponsors all the time are betting companies. And every major team I can think of, they have a betting sponsor pretty much. So we are essentially part of the ecosystem. We are helping it to grow because there are funds coming back to the ecosystem in a way of supporting the players, supporting the teams. At the same time, I've seen a huge shift in the perception of betting within the ecosystem from the publishers after past IPL in US. And in that note, if we look at because at the end of the day, we are speaking about the games. Games are controlled by publishers, which are to some extent gods on their own behalf within the game, because they can change everything. Of course, they don't want to disrupt the game, so they want players still play it. But at the same time, they control the ecosystem a lot in a good and bad manner, and we can discuss that much into a completely different topic. But if we look at publishers, either we are speaking about US publishers or we are speaking about Chinese publishers, mostly Tencent. And of course, we do understand what is the perception of Chinese and what was the perception of Americans when it comes to betting. So these things are changing mostly when it comes to US games, and the topic is still sensitive when it comes to Chinese games.
Awesome. And so I think, as a final, and perhaps Benedict, you can give us a final thought on the ability for people in this industry to build an authentic partnership with the esports industry. What do you think is one key takeaway about building that authentic partnerships? And we've just talked about sort of bridging that gap of distrust. And I do agree with you, Marek, that there has been a massive shift in the understanding of betting and the acceptance of its inevitability that's going to happen regardless of whether you engage with it or not. But I still think, also obviously there's a requirement to build these authentic partnerships and cooperations with the industry. And we talked with Jane earlier, said that sort of setting up and being consistent and being around is one thing. Do you have any other thoughts?
I think if I would just mention one word, or give you one word here, it's probably transparency. Yeah, I think transparency is crucial for the success for everyone that is tapping into esports, but also building partnerships. Yeah, so if you tap into, you should expect talking to an esports team, tournament organizer, etc., that is fully transparent to you, but also you should be willing to be transparent about things. Yeah, and then of course from a partnership or like sponsorship angle, that would be like, you should ask about certain KPIs. Yeah, because you want to know where you put your dollars, and you should get a sense or predict or forecast the outcome of your investment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think we're finishing right on time here. Thank you all for your thoughts on this really important topic. And I guess, the aim today wasn't to solve esports for you, merely to point back to the fact that esports must be understood as a very specific science in the scope of execution in your respective entities. If there's anything that you'd like to ask any of our esteemed colleagues here that we have with the experience and the expertise, I'm sure they'll be more than willing to help. I for sure am also willing to take any questions that you may have afterwards. But please join me in giving our panel a round of applause and thanking them for their time.